My husband was using our daughter's dance recital schedule to meet his mistress in the parking lot, but our daughter looked for him in the audience and found his empty seat and his full car and told me everything. My parents were bragging about giving my sister $60,000 for her first house. That's what good parents do. My 8-year-old looked up from his plate. Grandpa, how come you didn't help my daddy buy our house? Dead silence. Then, is it because you don't like us as much? Every fork at that table stopped. My dad opened his mouth, but my uncle spoke first. So I need to get this out because it happened 3 weeks ago, and I still can't eat at a dinner table without my chest getting tight. I've rewritten this 4 times trying to figure out where to start, and I think the best place is the dinner because that's where the bomb went off even though the fuse had been burning for about 30 years. I'm 38M, the younger of 2 kids. My sister Rachel is 41. My parents are Richard, 67, and Donna, 65. My uncle, my dad's younger brother, is Paul, 62. We were all at my parents' house for a Sunday dinner that my mother organized because Rachel and her husband Derek had big news to share. I brought my wife Maya and our son Oliver, who's 8, and who I now realize is the most dangerously honest person in my entire family tree. Dinner was normal for the first 40 minutes. My mom's pot roast. My dad's wine selection that he always talks about for too long. Rachel and Derek sitting across from us looking excited about something. Paul at the end of the table being quiet the way Paul always is at family dinners, present but watchful, like a man who's seen too much to participate fully but can't quite bring himself to leave. Oliver next to me eating his potatoes and kicking his feet under the table the way he does when he's bored but behaving. Then Rachel stood up. Big smile. Derek's arm around her. And she announced that she and Derek had just bought their first house. The table erupted. Congratulations. Hugs. My mom cried because my mom cries at everything Rachel does. My dad stood up and shook Derek's hand like the man had just won a war instead of signing a mortgage. I said congratulations because I meant it. Buying a house is a big deal, and regardless of everything I'm about to tell you, I don't hate my sister. I just hate the system that raised us differently and told us it was fair. Then came the part that changed everything. My dad, glass of wine in hand, standing at the head of the table like a man about to deliver a keynote at a conference nobody asked for, said, I want everyone to know that Donna and I gave Rachel and Derek $60,000 toward the down payment. Because that's what good parents do. They set their children up for success. He said it with pride. Chest out. Chin up. Like he was accepting an award for generosity. Like the whole table should applaud the sacrifice and nobility of Richard the provider. And honestly, most of the table did react that way. Mom beamed. Rachel teared up. Derek said, we couldn't have done it without you guys. Paul took a sip of his wine and didn't say anything, which I noticed but didn't think about until about 90 seconds later when it became the most important silence in the room. And I sat there, smiling, clapping along, doing what I've been doing at this table for 38 years, which is performing the role of the son who doesn't need anything, who's fine, who figured it out on his own, who never asks because he learned very early that asking in this family gets you a speech about self-reliance from a man who just handed his daughter $60,000. I bought my house 4 years ago. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, small backyard with a tree Oliver climbs every day after school. I bought it with money I saved working 60-hour weeks as a logistics manager for 7 years. I didn't get a dollar from my parents. Not because I didn't need it, because I was never offered it. And when I hinted, once, early in the process, my father said, a man should be able to stand on his own 2 feet. That's how I raised you. That sentence cost me 3 extra years of saving and roughly 400 Saturdays I spent at work instead of with my son. But sure, Dad. Self-reliance. Great lesson. Very consistent. I wasn't going to say anything at the dinner. I had swallowed this particular pill so many times that my throat had a groove and it shaped exactly like the words, it's fine. I'm happy for her. But my son hadn't learned how to swallow yet. Because he's 8. And 8-year-olds don't have grooves in their throats. They just have questions. Oliver had been sitting quietly through the whole announcement. Eating. Listening. Processing the way kids process adult conversations. Absorbing the parts they understand and filing the rest for later. He heard the number. He heard down payment. He heard, that's what good parents do. And his little brain, operating without any of the filters and politics and decades of family training that the rest of us carry, did what little brains do. It connected dots. He looked up from his plate, looked directly at my father, and said, in the clearest, most unbothered voice you've ever heard from an 8-year-old, "Grandpa, how come you didn't help my daddy buy our house?" The table didn't just go quiet. It went dead. The kind of dead where you can hear the ice shifting in someone's glass 3 seats away and the clock on the wall ticking and your own blood moving through your ears. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Rachel's smile froze like someone hit pause on a video. Derek looked at the table. Maya, my wife, looked at me. And my father, Richard the provider, the man who just declared himself parent of the year, looked at his grandson like the child had just pulled a fire alarm in a building that wasn't supposed to have one. Before anyone could redirect or change the subject or do the thing families do when truth shows up uninvited, Oliver followed up. Because 8-year-olds don't read rooms. They read reality. Is it because you don't like us as much? I felt Maya's hand find mine under the table and squeeze. Not a supportive squeeze. A brace yourself squeeze. Because she knew, the way wives always know, that this question had just detonated something that was never going to fit back together the same way. My dad opened his mouth. I could see the machinery starting up behind his eyes. The same machinery that's been generating excuses and justifications and redirections for 3 decades. He was going to say something dismissive. Something like, "Oh, buddy, that's different," or "We help everyone in different ways," or some other adult sentence designed to sound like an answer without actually being one. But he didn't get the chance. Because Paul spoke first. Update 1. My Uncle Paul set his wine glass down slowly. The way a man sets something down when he's decided he's not picking it up again until he's finished saying what he needs to say. He looked at my father and said, calm and steady, and with the weight of someone who's been rehearsing this in his head for years without knowing the moment would be tonight. "No, Richard. Not this time. You don't get to smooth this one over. Because that boy just asked you a question I've been asking you for 20 years, and you've never once given me an honest answer." My father's face changed. Not anger exactly. More like the face of a man who just realized that the walls he built around his secret have a door he forgot to lock, and his brother just found it. "You want to talk about what good parents do?" Paul continued. "Let's talk about it. Because I've been sitting at this table watching you play favorites since these two were children, and I'm done pretending I don't see it." Paul turned to me. Not with pity. With something closer to respect. The look of a man who's about to hand you something heavy because he believes you're strong enough to hold it. "You know your parents paid for Rachel's college, right?" he said to me. "All 4 years. Full tuition. Room and board. Books. Everything. They told you they could only afford to help you with 1 semester, and you took out loans for the rest. Did you know that Rachel's entire education was paid for?" I didn't know that. I knew they'd helped her. I didn't know it was everything. I looked at my father. He was staring at Paul with a jaw so tight I thought his teeth might crack. Paul wasn't done. "The wedding," he said. "Rachel's wedding. $35,000. Your parents covered it. Your wedding." He looked at me. "How much did they give you for yours?" I said $2,000. Because that's what it was. $2,000 and a card that said, "Proud of you, son." Rachel got a destination wedding, and I got an envelope. "The car," Paul said. "When Rachel graduated, your parents co-signed a lease on a BMW. When you graduated, you drove a used Civic you bought from a coworker for $3,000. He looked at Richard. "Am I lying?" My father said nothing. My mother had started crying, but not the kind of crying that comes from being moved. The kind that comes from being exposed. Then Paul said the thing that broke the table in half. "And let's talk about Mom and Dad's money, Richard. Because I think it's time." Paul's voice dropped lower. Quieter. More dangerous. "When our parents died, they left an estate worth $320,000. To be split equally between us. 160 each. I got my 160. You got yours. But somehow, in the 10 years since they passed, you've managed to funnel most of your share into one grandchild's direction and none of it into the others. Our parents left that money for the family. Not for Rachel. For the family. And you turned it into a scholarship fund for your favorite." The room was so silent I could hear Oliver breathing next to me. Little steady breaths from a kid who didn't understand most of what was being said, but understood the feeling in the room perfectly, because children are fluent in tension even when they don't know the vocabulary. My father stood up. "That's enough, Paul. This is my house and my family and my money, and I don't need my brother telling me how to spend it." And that's when I spoke for the first time. Update 2. I didn't raise my voice. I've never raised my voice at my father because I spent 38 years believing that quiet respect would eventually earn me what Rachel got for free. It didn't. But old habits die hard, and even in this moment, even with Paul's words still hanging in the air like smoke, I couldn't bring myself to yell. So I just talked. The way I talk at work when the numbers don't add up and someone needs to hear why. Dad, sit down. I need to say something, and I need you to hear it, because I've been holding it for a long time, and tonight it's coming out whether I want it to or not. He sat. Not because I told him to. Because his legs were already giving out from what Paul had just said, and sitting was the only option that didn't involve falling down in front of his entire family at a dinner table he thought he controlled. I said, "Last March, I paid your property tax. You called me and said you were short that quarter, and I drove over with a check for $2,300. In January, your car broke down, and I paid the repair bill. $1,400. When Mom had her eye surgery last year, I took 2 days off work unpaid to drive her to the appointments because you said you couldn't get time off from your golf league. When the kitchen sink leaked in October, you called me. Not a plumber. Me. And I drove 40 minutes on a Sunday and fixed it because that's what I do. That's what I've always done. I show up. I fix things. I write checks. I don't ask for credit and I don't keep score because I thought that's what family means." I paused. Looked at him. He was staring at the pot roast like it had personally betrayed him. "But here's the thing, Dad. While I was writing those checks and fixing your sink and driving Mom to surgery, you were putting together $60,000 for Rachel's house. You had $60,000 to give away, but you needed me to cover your property tax? You had $60,000 for a down payment, but when I told you 4 years ago that I was trying to buy a house, you said a man should stand on his own 2 feet? I pulled out my phone. Not for drama. Because I wanted to be specific. I opened my bank app and scrolled through the transfers. $2,300 in March, $1,400 in January, $600 in August for Mom's prescriptions you said insurance didn't cover. For $50 in June for the plumber I called when the toilet backed up because you said you couldn't afford it. You want me to keep going? Because I have 2 years of transfers to a man who apparently had $60,000 in a savings account the whole time." Rachel spoke. This was the moment I'd been waiting for without knowing it, because sometimes the thing that hurts the most isn't what your parents do. It's what your sibling says when they're caught standing in the spotlight you never got to share. She said, "That's not fair. Mom and Dad helped me because I needed it. You've always been fine on your own." I looked at her. My older sister. The woman I grew up with, shared a bathroom with, ate cereal with on Saturday mornings while cartoons played. And I said, "Rachel, I'm not fine on my own. I work 60-hour weeks. I missed my son's first steps because I was at the office. I work Saturdays. I've worked every Saturday for 3 years because I'm paying a mortgage that I could have paid on half the hours if someone had given me even a fraction of what they gave you. You didn't need more help. You just asked louder. And I didn't need less help. I just stopped asking because nobody was listening." Rachel opened her mouth, closed it. Derek put his hand on her arm, and she shrugged it off because she knew, in that moment, that there was nothing she could say that wouldn't make it worse. The math was the math. The checks were the checks. And the $60,000 gap between us wasn't something you could close with a sentence at a dinner table. My dad said, quietly, almost to himself, "I did what I thought was right." And that's when Oliver spoke again. Update 3. He'd been sitting there the whole time. My 8-year-old, kicking his feet under the table less now. Not because he was behaving, but because even he could feel the room was different, and his little body was responding the way little bodies do to adult pain by getting very still and very small. He'd been looking at me during my speech. Not at Grandpa. Not at Aunt Rachel. At me. Watching his father talk about money and work and Saturdays in a voice he'd never heard before because I've spent 8 years making sure this kid never hears me break. After my dad said, "I did what I thought was right," Oliver looked at me with those big eyes that see everything and understand half and guess the rest, and he said, "Daddy, is that why you work on Saturdays? Because Grandpa didn't help you." 8 years old. And he connected his grandfather's favoritism to his father's absence in one sentence that nobody in 3 decades of family dinners had the clarity or the courage to say out loud. He didn't say it with anger. He said it with the simple curiosity of a child who has been wondering for a long time why his dad is gone every Saturday while his friends' dads are at the park and has just been handed what he thinks is the answer. I looked at my son and every wall I'd built, every groove in my throat from swallowing the unfairness. Every Saturday, I told myself, it's fine. While I missed another soccer game or another morning of cereal and cartoons, all of it cracked open at once. Not in tears, in stillness. The kind of stillness that comes when you finally stop moving long enough to feel the weight of what you've been carrying. I said, "Come on, buddy. We're going home." Maya stood up before I did. She'd already grabbed Oliver's jacket from the hook by the door. She hadn't said a word the entire dinner. Not one. And she didn't say one now either. She just moved. Keys in hand. Jacket ready. The door already opening before I reached it. Because Maya had been waiting for this exit for 7 years, and she had the route memorized. We walked out. My dad called after us. "You're overreacting. Sit down and let's talk about this." I didn't turn around. My mother said, "Please don't leave like this." I didn't turn around. Rachel said nothing. Paul said nothing, but I heard him set his glass down, push his chair back, and follow us out the door. In the driveway, Paul caught up to me, put his hand on my shoulder. The same shoulder my son sits on when I carry him upstairs after he falls asleep on the couch. Paul said, "I should have said something 20 years ago. I'm sorry it took an 8-year-old to be braver than me." I said, "He gets it from his mother." Paul smiled, shook my hand, and walked to his car. And I stood in my parents' driveway holding my son's jacket and my wife's hand, and I looked at the house I grew up in. The house with the front door that was still open and the light pouring out and the sounds of a family trying to put itself back together after a child pulled out the one thread that held the whole lie in place. And I thought, I'm never swallowing anything at that table again. Update 4. The car ride home was quiet for the first 10 minutes. Oliver fell asleep almost immediately because emotional chaos apparently works like melatonin for third graders. His head was tilted against the window, mouth slightly open, completely at peace in a way that only someone who has no idea what they just did can be. Maya was in the passenger seat, looking forward, hands in her lap. Quiet in the way Maya gets quiet when she's holding something big and waiting for the right moment to set it down. I could feel it, the weight in the car. Not from the dinner, from her. From 7 years of something she'd been carrying alongside me, without telling me she was carrying it. Then she said, without turning her head, still looking at the highway, "I've been waiting 7 years for someone at that table to say what your uncle said tonight." I looked at her, back at the road, back at her. She wasn't crying. Maya doesn't cry about things she's already processed. She cries about surprises. This wasn't a surprise to her. This was confirmation. She said, "Every family dinner, Grant. Every single one. Every holiday. Every birthday. Every casual Sunday when you'd say, 'Let's go to Mom and Dad's,' and I'd put on a smile and sit at that table and watch your father talk about Rachel like she was the only child he ever produced. I watched him hand her things, praise her, celebrate her, and I watched you sit there absorbing it like radiation, quiet, smiling, pretending the exposure wasn't killing you slowly from the inside. I watched you drive home afterward and say it's fine, they're just proud of her, and then go to the office on Saturday because the mortgage payment was due and your parents had the money to help but chose not to." She paused, took a breath that sounded like it had been waiting in her lungs for a long time. "I watched you send your dad checks. I watched you fix his house on your days off. I watched you pull money from Oliver's college fund to cover your father's property tax while he was sitting on $60,000 earmarked for your sister. I watched all of it, Grant. Every transaction. Every phone call. Every Saturday you left the house before Oliver woke up. I watched it and I held it, and I didn't say anything because they're your parents and it had to come from you. It had to be your voice or your uncle's voice or someone at that table who loved you enough to crack the silence open. Not mine. Because if I said it, it would have been the daughter-in-law attacking the family. And I wasn't going to give your mother that ammunition." She finally turned and looked at me, eyes clear, steady. The face of a woman who has been carrying her husband's pain on top of her own for 7 years and setting it down for the first time. I just didn't think it would be an 8-year-old who started it. She looked back at the road, then at the back seat where Oliver was sleeping with his mouth open and his jacket bunched up under his chin. But honestly, it makes sense. He's the only person at that table who hasn't learned how to lie yet. And tonight that was exactly what we needed. Someone who couldn't lie. I reached over and took her hand. She squeezed back, and we drove the rest of the way in a silence that wasn't empty. It was full of 7 years of things we'd both been holding that finally had somewhere to land. Full of the relief that comes when someone you love says, "I saw it too." and you realize you were never as alone in it as you thought. The weeks after the dinner played out in stages the way family implosions always do. Not as one big explosion, but as a series of smaller detonations that keep going off every time you think the ground has settled. My dad called 3 days later. I was at the grocery store. Oliver was in the cart picking out cereal with the focus and determination of a surgeon selecting instruments. I almost didn't answer. Then I did, because avoiding a conversation you need to have only works if the conversation agrees to wait, and my father has never waited for anything in his life. He didn't apologize. Didn't even come close. He tried to reframe the entire dinner as a situation that got out of hand because of Paul, as if Paul had created the problem instead of identifying it. Your uncle had no right to bring up your grandparents' money at my dinner table. That was private family business between him and me. I stood in the cereal aisle watching Oliver compare 2 boxes of Cheerios like his future depended on the choice, and I said, "It was supposed to be between both of you, Dad. You took more than your share from an estate that your own parents intended to be split equally, and you funneled it into one grandchild's life and pretended the other one didn't exist." Uncle Paul didn't air dirty laundry. He aired the truth. There's a difference. Dad got defensive the way he always does when facts show up uninvited to a conversation he thought he controlled. "I don't need my son telling me what's right and wrong." And I said, standing in a grocery store with fluorescent lights buzzing above me and my son now hugging a box of Honey Nut Cheerios to his chest. And I don't need my 8-year-old asking my father why he doesn't love us at a dinner table. "But here we are, Dad. Here we are." He went quiet. I let the quiet sit there the way you let evidence sit in a courtroom after it's been presented. Then I said what I needed to say, and I said it once because I wasn't going to repeat it. "I'm done sending you money. I'm done driving 40 minutes to fix your sink on my Sundays. I'm done pulling from my son's college fund to cover your property tax while you save $60,000 for Rachel's down payment. When you're ready to be honest, really honest, about what happened at that table and every table before it, call me. Until then, I need space." I hung up. Oliver held up the Cheerios and said, "Can we get these?" I said, "Absolutely, buddy." And we moved on. Literally. Rachel texted me a week later. Long message. The kind people write when they've had 7 days to construct a defense and still can't find one that holds water. She opened with, "I didn't know they weren't helping you." I swear I didn't know. I thought about that for a full day before responding. Sat with it. Turned it over. Tested it against reality. Then I wrote back, "You were at every holiday where I showed up in a 10-year-old Civic and you showed up in a leased BMW. You were at my wedding where Mom and Dad gave me $2,000 and at yours where they gave you $35,000. You saw the gap, Rachel. Every single time. You watched me work Saturdays and you watched yourself get handed everything and you never once, not once in 38 years, turned to Mom and Dad and said, 'Why are you treating my brother differently?' You didn't ask because the answer would have cost you something. And not asking when you can see the unfairness isn't innocence. It's convenience. And convenience is just selfishness in a nicer outfit." She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. Some messages aren't meant to start conversations. They're meant to end the ones that should have happened decades ago. Paul and I started talking. Really talking. For the first time in years, maybe ever. Not about the dinner specifically, but about everything that led to it. About growing up with Richard as a father and Richard as a brother. About the patterns he'd seen from the outside that I was too deep inside to notice. About the inheritance and how he'd wrestled with it for years, going back and forth between confronting Richard and just letting it go because fighting his brother felt like losing even if he won. But watching his nephew, me, get overlooked year after year while his niece got celebrated for existing was the thing he couldn't swallow anymore. "You can take money from me and I'll eventually forgive it," he told me on the phone one night. "But you take opportunity from a kid and give it to the other kid and tell both of them it's fair? That I can't watch anymore. That I'll remember forever." Uncle Paul became the family I always needed but never had from the people who were supposed to provide it. Sunday phone calls about nothing. Texts during the week asking how Oliver was doing. He came to Oliver's school play last month. Drove 45 minutes. Sat in the front row. Clapped louder than any person in that auditorium. And Oliver, mid-performance, looked out at the crowd the way kids do when they're searching for their people, and he found Paul's face in the second seat from the left, and he waved. And Paul waved back with a grin so wide I could see it from where I was standing in the back. And I thought, Sometimes the family you're given isn't the family you end up with. Sometimes you have to build your own front row with the people who actually show up. I stopped working Saturdays. That was the first real thing I changed after the dinner because it was the thing that cost the most and gave back the least. The first Saturday was disorienting. I woke up at 5:30 out of habit, reached for my work clothes, then remembered I didn't need them. Walked around the house for an hour not knowing what to do with myself because my body had been programmed for 7 years to be somewhere else on this day, and suddenly the program was deleted and there was nothing on the screen. I organized the garage, fixed a shelf that had been crooked for months, made pancakes from scratch because Oliver once mentioned he liked pancakes, and I filed that under things to do when I finally have a Saturday. Oliver came downstairs around 8. Hair everywhere, pajamas twisted. He walked into the kitchen and saw me standing at the stove, and his face did this thing I'll never forget. This confused, delighted, almost suspicious expression like he was seeing a mirage and didn't want to trust it in case it disappeared. And he said, quiet at first, then louder when he realized it was real, "Dad, you're home." Like home on a Saturday was a holiday he didn't know existed until right now. Like the concept of his father being present on this specific day of the week was so foreign that it needed to be confirmed out loud before he could believe it. That two-word sentence, "you're home," cost more to hear than any $60,000 check my parents ever wrote. Because it meant that for 3 years, every Saturday, my son noticed I was gone. He just never said it. Until now he said the opposite. And the opposite was better than anything. We ate pancakes. We climbed the tree in the backyard. We watched a movie in the afternoon that neither of us finished because we both fell asleep on the couch, and Maya took a photo of us and didn't post it anywhere because some moments are too real for a screen. They just need to exist in the room they happened in. That's my Saturday now. Every Saturday. Pancakes and trees and movies we don't finish. And I look at Oliver kicking his feet at the table, talking about dinosaurs and his friend's new bike and why the sky is blue. And I think about that dinner 3 weeks ago where my 8-year-old asked one question and the whole family fell apart. But that's the thing about questions kids ask. They're not trying to break anything. They're just pointing at the crack that was already there. And sometimes the crack is so big that one small finger is all it takes to split the whole thing open. My parents gave my sister $60,000 and told me to stand on my own feet. So I did. And I'm standing. In my kitchen. On a Saturday. With pancake batter on my shirt and my son's laughter in my ears, and not a single dollar of debt to the people who decided I wasn't worth the investment. Turns out they were right about one thing. I can stand on my own 2 feet. I just wish they hadn't made me prove it by taking the chair away. Edit. This got way more attention than I expected. To answer the top questions. No, my parents haven't apologized yet. Yes, Oliver is doing great and has no idea he's internet famous. Paul says hi. Maya says stop asking for her pancake recipe. And to the person who DM'd me saying, 60,000 isn't that much money. Respectfully, it's not about the 60,000. It's about the zero. It was always about the zero. If this one hit home, like and subscribe. Drop a comment if you've ever been the kid who got the zero while your sibling got the 60. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next one.